people who have Alzheimer's disease and people who don't, and then you try to use it as to classify sort of an unknown genetic sequence. I mean, you know, obviously, to see how accurate your prediction is, you always have the training set, and then you have the set you use for your predictions to compare how accurate your prediction is. And that's also how you're benchmarking it ultimately.
Okay, so would you be running this your complete final model for one particular disease or a range of diseases?
Probably for a range of diseases, because again, you want to benchmark, because maybe it's for some strange reason better for one disease than another. So because that's quite possible, depending on sort of maybe some diseases, they're associated with multiple genetic abnormalities. Maybe that has some influence. So it would be an interesting question to see if there are any differences.
And so my final thought, I don't know if it's really a question, but because I don't understand the data. I mean, I know you're sending in sequences of genes, but to me, it has no meaning as to what an AAC is.
Well, these are just the base pairs, basically, and it doesn't have any meaning to me. That only makes meaning in context, just like your letters A, B, C, D, E. If you see them on their own, they don't mean anything, because unless you construct words and the language from it, it doesn't have any meaning in itself.
So is there any benefit to finding unseen patterns?
Yeah, this is what it's all about, basically. That's what DNA BERT is doing. It kind of constructs a relationships between those sort of clusters of words.
Okay.
That's why you do tokens.
Yeah, and unfortunately, if you wanted to add a quantum layer at the beginning of it, you would be then tasked at retraining the whole BERT.
That's correct.
Lower level. Yeah.
Probably.
Okay.
I don't know. I mean, it's a good question, actually. I mean, maybe someone else. Maybe it's possible still to stick it underneath and still have some meaningful result. That's actually a really interesting question.
Because one of the many of the quantum algorithms have to do with the quantum Fourier function, and blanking on the other one, but they're all designed to find these hidden subpatterns. So maybe if you do that before you go feed it into BERT, you might be able to reduce the amount of training that's required by BERT. But I see it as an enormous task. If you have to retrain BERT yourself, that could be prohibitive. I get it. So, but maybe somebody out there's got the big computers that could play with that.
Yeah, it would be nice to have some people on board. But I think it's an interesting question whether you could actually stick a layer underneath. Perhaps even because what you're talking about is like some kind of compression, isn't it? If you could already see certain patterns, that's like a compression mechanism. So maybe if you could feed compressed data, and then would it still be able to make any sense of it, even if it's been pre-trained, or would it just mess up the system? It's an interesting question. I wouldn't be able to answer it, neither theoretically nor without the knowledge of having done it.
You may have to even start over, because what would come out of a Fourier transform or an inverse Fourier wouldn't look anything like what they were feeding into it. So you might have to completely start over. But it's a very, very interesting topic. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Hope you liked it.
Tim, did you have something?
Oh, yes. Does BERT model any of the physics behind the DNA?
No, it's very little to do with the physics. So I mean, I'm sure that there's a lot of quantum physics, quantum chemistry applicable to the DNA, but the model is simply just about relationships between those bases. So it's like a language. When you speak words, it's not very much about the physics of your voice box. It's all about the words, how they relate, basically, when BERT does any sort of computation. So it doesn't involve any of the physics of the DNA as such.
Okay.
And do you know who Illumina is, Berend? Like the biggest US sequencer out here? Does that name ring a bell?
Oh, it's a company you're talking about, yeah?
Yeah, I just want to see if you can kind of relate to the viewers as far as like the kind of stuff you're doing as like the drop-in. Because what it sounds like to me is like they have these huge conventional computers, and then now we're just going to use quantum